So welcome back to another Homeschool Resource Finder Parent Information Workshop. Today I'm joined by Liam from Maths Pathway. Thanks for joining us again, Liam. We are going to be discussing data and how learning data can help us understand our kids' strengths and weaknesses better. So I'm actually going to hand the floor straight over to you, Liam, and you can share away with us.
Great. Thanks so much, Kylie. So I've got a few slides prepared to take us through today. So I'll share my screen. At the end of the session, I'll also dive into the Maths Pathway program so that you can get a bit of a sneak peek as well as what it is like if you would like to join up with us. But without further ado, I'd first pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging of all the lands in which we are gathering today and commit to a brighter future together. So as Kylie mentioned, we're going to be looking at the sort of some of the differences and where data makes a huge difference. And it sort of comes down to an age-based approach to learning versus a personalized competency-based approach to learning. And that's how we learn as according to the learning science, which is far more evolved these days and really quite specific. And how Maths Pathway incorporates that learning science in the approach in how we operate. So, and there's plenty of room for questions, so do feel free to pop questions into the chat at any stage through the presentation, and then at appropriate times we'll pause and take those questions. At other stages, I'll open the floor as well where you can verbally ask as we go.
Thanks, Liam.
So when you have a mismatch between the level of skill and the level of challenge, that's when you get all of this anxiety. And particularly in mathematics, it's quite prevalent that, a lot of students just don't like the subject and are really fearful because they find themselves just not capable of, diving in what's being taught at that particular moment. It's because it's such a structured subject. These little gaps in students' understanding or something that they've missed, they're absent for a day, didn't quite grasp the concept fully, and it just moves on, and that creates these barriers to future understanding. This is something the researchers have called the iceberg problem, and it's really nice visual to help explain why these issues occur. And what we see here is kind of resembling the traditional classroom maths experience where, in year six, the year six teacher teaches the level six curriculum, just that one bar of the curriculum here. Students typically don't get 100% on all the assessments they do throughout the year, so they're not mastering everything, even if they get 95%. What was that 5% they didn't quite understand? So there's always something that, isn't fully grasped. And over the years, the systems are seeing these modest declines, like the students are really struggling to pick it back, catch up and join in with keeping up. And what the issue is, it's all the unfinished learning that's hidden beneath the surface. So in school systems, they're always analysing this. We're assessing how they went on level six. We're assessing and looking at how they went on level seven, but paying no mind to all of this unfinished learning that lies beneath the surface. And this builds up and accumulates. And it's the reason why students struggle to understand. It's in this unfinished learning where the keys are really held in order to fully grasp and fully understand. And that's in mathematics more than any other subject, because mathematics is so cumulative. So you wouldn't teach, counting by threes unless a child already knew how to count by ones and count by twos. So you need to sort of follow that sequencing. And another example, like if you're trying to apply percentages, you first need to know how to multiply decimals, have some understanding of ratio and that sort of proportionate reasoning. So without those keys, trying to apply percents is really, really tough. And there's examples like this right throughout the maths curriculum. It is everywhere. Uh, so what is learning? When you break it down in its most simplest form, learning is just transferring to long-term memory. So we want to go from, looking at something new and somehow storing it in our long-term memory. We do need to think about it. How do we do that? It's a combination of our working memory and the residue of thought of what we've applied our thinking to that stores into our long-term memory and how we work. So the working memory is where the thinking happens, just like RAM in a computer. It can only hold a few items at a time. So it's quite limited in how much information and stimuli you can have and be consciously thinking about at any given moment. And it has to juggle quite a lot. There's a lot of sensory input, so you need to filter out things that are unrelated and just focus on what you want to think about. But when we compare someone who, is showing success and really able to dive in and grapple with a new piece of content, some of the language they use is around a novice versus an expert. And the working memory for both a novice and expert is limited. So that doesn't change. The working memory is always limited. But what does shift, what is different, is how much is in the long-term memory. So this is our prior knowledge. And we all have different experiences, we have different understandings. So the novice will have just less information in their long-term memory, and it may be less well organized. So an expert who has a vastly more well-developed long-term memory forms these schemata, they're called. It's the linking of concepts together and the way so when they get a new piece of information, they link it with that and link it with that, and it becomes really sticky. Like that's how you retain it in the long-term memory. Whereas if you can't link this new information with what you already have, that's where you forget that sort of material very, very quickly. So let's consider this more about the cumulative nature of mathematics and how we would go with learning something new. So in this example, we've got a two-step algebraic equation, and a novice would perceive these as individual items. We've got some numbers, a letter, a couple of math symbols. So they're trying to store all of this information in their working memory, and the working memory is juggling and working overtime. Versus an expert. So when an expert can recognize from their long-term memory that this here is an expression, they sort of chunk that information together. So it becomes one item instead of lots of individual items. So they'll recognize the expression, see a fixed value, and recognize this symbol is equivalence. So then way they've only got the three things to work with, and they can think a bit more deeply about this problem. This is called chunking in learning science. So instead of four individual pieces of information, you've got a connected schemata that links it all together, and it becomes one piece of information that the working memory can retrieve from long-term memory when required. And it frees up the working memory to tackle more complex tasks and thinking and connect anything new to what they already have. So that's how the working memory and long-term memory work. Now we'll sort of compare the iceberg problem in traditional schooling, where we only look above the surface at the at-level curriculum, versus a personalized competency-based learning approach. This is known as PCBL, if you ever wanted to look at it. And Maths Pathway is the only company in Australia that offers a PCBL approach that's fully mapped out against every curriculum in Australia. So in a personalised competency-based program, we first need to work out what every child knows already, and then take them on a journey from that point. So in relation to the example that we looked at before with this two-step algebraic equation to solve, we will know that students have already had exposure to and have practiced and have mastered what an expression is. So we can effectively guarantee that they have this knowledge in their long-term memory already. Similarly with solving one-step equations. So they've already practiced the one step. So once they have those two, you know, pieces of content mastered, it's a lot easier to then tackle this next problem in sequence.
Mm.
And that's one of the strengths of Maths Pathway. So we know they have the prior knowledge that's required. So none of that unfinished learning goes unaddressed. In Maths Pathway, we look at the entire iceberg, not just what lies above the surface. And this is where, you know, using the chunking, you have that success. Contrast this to a school system where I've been a teacher in high school and have taught these things, and there's not enough time to go and address all of that unfinished learning and keep pace with the age-based approach to teaching the curriculum. And so I would be taught, you know, forced to teach a recipe. You know, not all students would have the fundamental knowledge required. So I'd teach the process, the steps, and hopefully students would remember enough to repeat the steps, which wasn't always the case. And that memory might last long enough for the test, but then a month later or a year later, it drops away very quickly. So that recipe following approach, dealing with lots of singular bits of information really challenges students. And if you change the order, it's really confusing. I need a new recipe. The previous recipe didn't work, versus a deep conceptual understanding where they can, you know, recognize what's happening and work it out. And students facing this, and it happens time and time again through the schooling system, and even with certain resources, if they're just focused on, you know, progressing through content without confirming mastery of the sub-concepts, you get this feeling like I'm not a maths person, and the divide extends over time. So it just gets really reinforced, and it's known as the Matthew effect, like where, you know, if you're already not successful, you continue to be not successful. So with Maths Pathway, what you get is adaptive diagnostics. So we check the entire curriculum from level 1 to 10A, you know, 10 extension and advanced. So setting students up for the senior subjects in year 11 and 12, or whichever pathway they choose to go down. They're very intelligent diagnostics, so we can make certain assumptions to get through them quickly. And there are 4 overall. We don't do it all at once because that would be, you get testing fatigue and other issues. But you know, you're supplied with all of these codes to move through the 4 diagnostics and have the complete learning profile. From there, the system will provide sequenced learning plans. So we won't allow students to work on content that they're not ready for. So it'll just be the next thing that's right for them. And mapping all of that content in sequence is quite a task. It can be done manually, but when you look at ours, it's quite a massive, complicated web. And then we have regular checkpoints. So every couple of weeks, there's a test to see on what you've just learned. Have you mastered it, or do you need to revisit and refresh that? And their learning profile updates instantly after that test. So the learning profile is always up to date. So students or children are always accessing the next piece of content that is just right for them. Here's a little sample of one of our maps in that cumulative nature. So, you know, we wouldn't let students work on multiplying algebra with brackets unless they'd already mastered hidden operations in algebra, and they need to know variables. So there are a lot of things there that are required to, you know, to have success with this. It is, you know, a complicated web.
Yeah. Can I just ask a quick question?
Please.
You mentioned the school-based way when you're obviously working in a school and that they look at age-based or grade level maths. I just want to clarify that that's not necessarily just a school thing. It's actually the program that they're using. Is that correct? Because they're not using a competency-based program. So that can happen even with other math programs that may be created specifically in the homeschool environment as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So a lot of programs that they'll have all of the content from level 1 to level 10, but they'll just move students through that content without necessarily confirming that mastery and the granular detail on what they truly understand to a deep level to know exactly what they're ready for. There's nothing else like this in Australia.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Um, if you were to join us, you do get access to our diagnostic tool in the first 2-week free trial and can get 20% off your first month with that discount code. I'll share a page afterwards with this information and a few other free resources for joining us today. When you sign up, you do get a welcome email that has all of the login details for your child. And then what you will see, let's jump in. The first step for students once they sign in is to begin a diagnostic. So the learning profile is blank. We don't assume anything without asking questions and having that evidence. This one's already been started, but there's just a lot of smart things built in. So if a student makes a silly error, what's this asking for, a quarter? If I press the wrong button once, it'll ask a similar question straight away. So a student actually has to get a question wrong twice on the diagnostic for the system to say, they don't understand this yet and they need to learn it. So it accounts for silly errors like that. Was that a quarter? No, yep, submit answer. So the diagnostic just goes through like this. But I won't spend too much longer there. Once you've completed the diagnostic, that's when you move on to working on the modules, we call them, which is the sequenced maths learning. So this is Alice, and Alice has completed that first diagnostic. There's a series of 6 activities to do, which we call modules, before that test. You have a test every 2 weeks. We don't want students to continue working on for months before we've checked to see that they really understand it and that they're getting it fully. So if they don't master one of these modules, they have the opportunity to do it again until it is mastered. Not necessarily straight away, but they can do it in the next sequence if they choose to. There's some built-in features which are worth pointing out. So for students with additional needs, there's different fonts which are all recommended for dyslexia. You can change spacing between letters and space between words and enable text-to-speech. So they can have questions read to them in low literacy environments and they can click on a speaker button to go there. We do have little customizations for avatars and themes, but they don't spend 3 hours compiling an outfit. It's more focused on the maths. And you can also come into the parent portal. There's another explainer video here about the personalized competency-based learning approach. A bunch of other questions are answered. If you enter your email here, you get notified every time a test is being completed. So you can come in and take a look. We'll jump back to the student portal. But that data we spoke about that Kylie mentioned at the beginning, you have access to your own child's data as well. So if you click on the data tab and come to their curriculum grid, this is where you see the granular detail of everything that they do know in the whole maths curriculum up to 10 extension. And this is, in Alice's case, what she's learned from diagnostics, what she's demonstrating that she understands there. I haven't done any current learning yet, but that will all show in previous years' learning, so you can see what they've been doing recently in the year. This student hasn't yet finished all the diagnostics, so there's some undiagnosed areas yet. This light grey we have diagnosed, and we know that she doesn't know it yet. So this would be the unfinished learning from earlier years that hold the keys to her experience success in later maths. So, and you can click into any one of these cells, and you really do get that specific granular detail on the exact mathematics that they have to fill in and address all of that unfinished learning. and then to really thrive. And they start to, it becomes magical when they start experiencing success and that they can do maths. It really turns around. It might take, a few tests to overcome some earlier barriers and some feelings of anxiety that they've had in the past. But once you get two or three tests of having success, you really start to see that shift, and it really changes the flow and the experience for them. So it becomes
Yeah.
a beautiful thing to watch.
Yeah, that definitely happened here, Liam. So,
Yeah,
and we like that the tests aren't huge. They're not this ginormous, scary thing. It's really just a bit of a recap on what you've done in the last fortnight, and that has definitely happened here. There's just that progression now, and we're all okay just to hop on and do our math lesson whenever we need. So, yeah.
yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
That's always love hearing those stories. We do get them all the time, and the modules, the way they're designed, really do set them up well for those tests. And I've just come into where we call the learning map. This is where they choose instead of big scary things. It's like learning maths is just like climbing the rungs of the ladder. So, this is all of the mathematical concepts, that take you all the way to that 10 extension where we're not yet um, diagnosed, but it just opens up on what they're ready to do next. And typically you would, master a concept and then move on to the next concept and just sort of work your way through. And these blue ones are all the available modules. So they're the ones that are just right for them to move ahead in sequence in the different areas of maths. The grey ones they can't do yet until they complete some of the prerequisite knowledge or the sub-concepts that lead to that. However, you can click on a module path here and say, oh, I just need to do this one first, and then I can access that one there. Right. The modules, they build in all of these supports. So warm-ups are in research terms, it's called space practice, and this is our space practice engine. What it does is surfaces content that they've already mastered. So it's not new material here, but there's a way to hack the forgetting that happens over time. And it's called space practice or space retrieval, where if you surface this content again, if you have to retrieve the information again, when you're at a 90% probability of remembering, that's the ideal time. And as you do that, it flattens the forgetting curve. And so over time, you can space it out further and further. So that all happens automatically by the system. It's really quite powerful. And it's just about 2 minutes. And then the entrance ticket is like a preview to what you're about to learn. So the module itself is where the new learning occurs. And they're organized so that it touches upon the prior knowledge. So it surfaces those subcomponents that link to it so that students access and bring that knowledge from their long-term memory to the fore so that they're ready to think in deeply about this new content, followed by an exit ticket, which is exactly what the same type of question that they will do on the tests. So it's really setting them up so they can demonstrate success there. If they're not successful on that entrance ticket, there's additional supports and reviewing additional questions just to make sure that they really get it and understand. So that's all really built into the system quite well. Are there any questions so far?
No, no questions.
No questions? Great. Would you like to see some of the warm-up questions? I can do more demoing here. Is that enough sort of
Yeah, show us
clarity?
a couple of the questions of how they actually function, Liam. That would be great.
Yeah, sure. So I've got my speaker on now because I've turned that, but these are the quick, there's usually 6 question types. How much is the um, eight worth in there? So place value um, 800 question. Sorry, I'm going to turn off my speaking talking worksheets because I don't need that.
So if
And
you
any
enable that text to speech, that will always happen.
Yeah, so that'll always
Okay.
be on.
Yep.
I think you actually have to click on the speaker part for it to do. I just accidentally clicked where it had the speaker, which
Okay.
would do that. And so you just put, punch in your answers. If you get it wrong here, there's no penalty or issues, but it's content that students should be familiar with. So in 4 hours, 312. And whenever a calculator is needed or available, that'll pop up on the screen automatically. So typically you don't want students to have a calculator when they're working through maths pathway, because some of the content that we're measuring and wanting to assess becomes redundant or trivial if you're using a calculator to do it. Like, we really want to reinforce times tables and that deeper understanding. So it's best if students don't have a calculator with them when they're working through the system. Whenever one is needed, it pops up on the screen for them. So we do a third, yes. We'll move on. And there are always a couple of generally non-routine problem solving questions as well. So in addition to some simple practice, there's some worded problems to develop problem solving. In this case, looking at that. So yeah, they're called NAPLAN style because that's the type of questions they do. To the lines of symmetry, so it looks like A and C. And then, so that's refreshing everything that we've just done. We'll continue learning. With the entrance ticket, this is when you preview. So this is what we're not expected to know this yet because I'm about to learn this, but I do get to quick preview it. It's like, oh, okay. All right, let's go in. It's also a second kind of redundancy with those diagnostics. So if they did make mistakes on diagnostics, and this is something I really do know and do understand, I can say, oh, actually, I know this already. I don't need to go and learn it. So you can say, I'd probably get this correct if I tried. And that way they can move on from this module and go to the next thing in sequence that's a little bit harder. But if they try and they don't get it, let's say start there, I'm going to say left, get it wrong. It's like incorrect. So, I'll learn that in the module so that we can get into it and go from there.
Okay.
So, oh, sorry, I got the second one right without reading it. But then it'll just confirm. It's like, oh, I don't know it yet well, or I've learned it recently. So this will just allow me to move into the module anyway. So we do encourage workbooks. Pen and paper is a really powerful learning tool. There are a lot of modules now where you can answer questions online as well, but every single one of them will require some level of bookwork, even if it's only, one question initially. The bookwork is scaffolded throughout the whole system. So really lower level maths, where it is times tables, for example, the answer might be 3. It's a bit trivial to write down the number 3. There's no working to show. So you can input answers like that online. But when you get to solving two-step equations, why we looked at before, it's really important to set out your line by line working. You need to get stuff out of your working memory onto the paper so you can grapple with it for the next step in that sequence. So that bookwork is built up gradually. So lower levels, not much in the modules. You get to the high levels, it's almost entirely bookwork. So we've worked on developing that well over time. And which of the following statements is true? So this would be stuff that should be somewhat familiar to me already, or just beginning with the basics. What's that? Try and transfer 2 units left, right. 2 units to the left looks right, doesn't it? Let's say, check my answer. I'd say A. Yeah, that's great. And so you get the answer. You get fully worked solutions as you go. You complete the question. You can move on. With this one, I'm not so sure. I might be a bit stuck, so I can click on some help. And the first step to getting help is checking the answer, because you might be able to work backwards from there. Once you've checked the answer, we have a video in every single module as well. So the video is like the explicit teaching the teacher would do on a whiteboard.
On a grid. The word translate means to move to another position. We're going rectangle.
We won't watch it all, but it just sort of,
if you have been, thanks for watching.
So all of the modules come with their own video explainer as well. You can check your answer, complete question, and move on. So you progress through the modules in this fashion.
Well, thank you so much for that. Appreciate your time. And I know the replay will be helpful to everyone. So thanks, Liam.
My pleasure. All right. Thanks, Kylie.